The Krell Dominion had been burning its way across the outer rim of the galaxy for 300 years. Their ships moved like locusts through space, leaving nothing but death and silence behind them. 47 civilizations had fallen before their endless swarms. 47 unique cultures, languages, and dreams had been erased from existence. The Krell themselves were nightmares made flesh. They stood 8 feet tall on 6 chitinous legs, with bodies covered in black armor that could repair itself within hours. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness of their ships, and their mandibles could crush steel. But the worst thing about them was not their appearance. It was their mind. They shared one consciousness across billions of individuals. When one Krell learned something, they all knew it. When one Krell died, the others barely noticed. This hive mind made them perfect killers. They felt no fear, no mercy, no doubt. They simply consumed and moved forward. Now they had come to Valesia. The Valesian homeworld hung in space like a blue and green jewel. From orbit, you could see the crystalline cities that caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbows. The Valesians were a gentle people, known across the galaxy for their art, music, and philosophy. They communicated through telepathy, sharing thoughts and emotions as easily as others spoke words. War was foreign to them. Violence was something they had read about in ancient history books, not something they practiced. That made them perfect victims. The Krell blockade surrounded Valesia like a dark cloud. Hundreds of bioships pulsed with organic technology, their weapons charged and ready. Inside the largest vessel, the Hive Admiral surveyed the planet below with cold calculation. The Valesians had some defense ships, but they were designed for exploration, not combat. This would be easy. On Valesia's surface, billions of telepathic voices cried out in shared terror. They had sent distress signals to the Galactic Council weeks ago. They had begged for help, for protection, for anything. The Council had promised to send aid. But the Council always promised and rarely delivered. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from 30 species gathered in emergency session. The chamber was built to inspire cooperation, with seats arranged in a circle so no one species sat above another. But right now that circle felt like a cage. "We must act," shouted Ambassador Tyros, his blue scales shimmering with agitation. His people, the Sariwans, had narrowly escaped Krell invasion 2 decades ago. They still remembered the terror. "The Valesians will be extinct by tomorrow if we do nothing." "And what would you have us do?" replied Counselor Vex, her mechanical voice cold and precise. "The last 3 military coalitions we sent against the Krell were destroyed. Completely. We lost over 2,000 ships and gained nothing but corpses." The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered those defeats. The Krell could not be beaten by conventional means. Their numbers were too great, their regeneration too fast, their coordination too perfect. Perhaps we could negotiate," suggested a smaller delegate, his voice barely a whisper. "Negotiate what?" Tyros snapped. "The Krell do not negotiate. They do not want territory or resources or power. They want extinction. They want to be the only ones left." As the Council argued in circles, the battle for Valesia began. The Valesian defense fleet consisted of 42 ships. They were beautiful vessels, designed with elegant curves and artistic detail. They moved into formation between their homeworld and the Krell swarm, knowing they were about to die but unable to do anything else. The telepathic cries of their planet echoed in every defender's mind. They could feel the fear of their children, their parents, their loved ones. They could not abandon them. Commander Celis stood on the bridge of the flagship Dawn's Prayer. She was young for a commander, barely 50 years old, but war had come too quickly for tradition. Through the viewport, she could see the Krell bioships beginning their approach. They moved with horrible purpose, like spiders crawling across a web. "All ship and spread formation pattern 7, she transmitted, her mental voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "We cannot stop them, but we can delay them. Every minute we buy is another minute for evacuation ships to reach the southern continent." The Krell opened fire first. Biological projectiles, acidic plasma, and living missiles crossed the space between the fleets. The Valesian shields held for perhaps 10 seconds before beginning to fail. These were science vessels with defensive upgrades, not warships. They were never meant for this. The Dawn's Prayer shuddered as something tore through her port side. Atmosphere vented into space, taking 6 crew members with it. Celas felt their terror as they died, felt it echo through her mind like a scream, but she forced herself to focus. She fired the ship's weapons, managing to damage one Krell vessel before 3 more surrounded her position. One by one, the Valasian ships fell. They fought with desperation and courage, but courage meant nothing against overwhelming force. Within 20 minutes, only 12 ships remained. Within 40 minutes, only 3. Within an hour, the Dawn's Prayer drifted alone in the void. Her engines destroyed and her hull breached in a dozen places. Commander Celis watched through the cracked viewport as the Krell invasion pods began launching toward her homeworld. Thousands of them carrying millions of soldiers. She had failed. They had all failed. Then something impossible happened. The sensor officer, half buried under debris, suddenly gasped. "Commander, there's something on long-range scanners. A ship. A big one." Celis pulled herself to the sensor console, her body aching from injuries. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a contact approaching from the unexplored regions of space. It was massive, larger than any Krell bioship, and its energy signature was completely unknown. "What species is that?" Celis asked. I don't know, Commander. It's not in any database. The design is strange. The materials are strange. Everything about it is wrong." The mysterious ship maintained a steady course directly toward the Krell fleet. It ignored all hailing frequencies. It did not slow down or change direction. It simply came forward alone toward an armada of 500 warships. On the Krell command vessel, the Hive Admiral received notification of the intruder. Through the shared consciousness of the Dominion, it analyzed the approaching ship. The conclusion was unanimous, insignificant. 1 ship against 500. It would be destroyed quickly. But something about the ship's design troubled the Hive Admiral. It was crude, using what appeared to be primitive kinetic weapons and basic nuclear technology. The hull was covered in strange markings and symbols, and on its side, in letters that the Krell computer slowly translated, was a name, USNS Indomitable. Below that, 2 more words, United Earth. The Hive Admiral had never heard of Earth, but that was about to change. For humanity, for all its violence and warfare and bloodshed throughout history, had finally found a purpose for all those hard-learned lessons. They had found someone who truly deserved their fury. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened the innocent in front of those who had mastered the art of war. The Hive Admiral watched the approaching vessel with the cold calculation that came from 3 centuries of conquest. 1 ship, 500 of theirs. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was certain. Still, protocol demanded a response to any threat, no matter how insignificant. "Dispatch Squadron 7, the Hive Admiral commanded through the shared consciousness. "Eliminate the intruder, quickly." 50 Krell war cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the human battleship. Each cruiser was a masterpiece of biological engineering, grown rather than built, with weapons that had shattered planets and shields that had withstood nuclear fire. The squadron moved in perfect coordination, their hive mind allowing them to react as one entity. They closed to weapons range and prepared to fire. Then, for the first time in over an hour, the mysterious ship responded to hails. The transmission was audio only, the words translated through Galactic Standard Protocol. The voice was female, calm and utterly unbothered by the 50 warships targeting her vessel. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth naval ship Indomitable. You are engaged in acts of genocide against a peaceful species. Stand down immediately or be eliminated." For 3 full seconds, the Hive Admiral processed this statement. Eliminated? This single ship threatened to eliminate them? The concept was so absurd that even the perfect unity of the hive mind seemed to pause in confusion. "Destroy it," the Hive Admiral ordered. Squadron 7 opened fire. Bioplasma cannons unleashed torrents of superheated matter. Acid missiles tracked toward the human ship from multiple angles. Living mines were deployed to surround and consume the target. It was enough firepower to crack a moon in half. The Indomitable's response was immediate and terrifying. Point defense systems erupted across the battleship's hull. Thousands of small railguns tracked and fired in perfect synchronization, each shot calculated by sophisticated artificial intelligence. The bioplasma was scattered by precisely timed kinetic impacts. The acid missiles were detonated at safe distances. The living mines were shredded before they could close to effective range. Then the Indomitable returned fire. The Krell had never seen weapons like these. Railguns accelerated tungsten rounds to significant fractions of light speed, each projectile carrying kinetic energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. They punched through Krell bioarmor like it was tissue paper, continuing through multiple ships before their energy finally dissipated. Missile tubes opened along the Indomitable's flanks, launching salvos of nuclear-tipped warheads. But these were not simple atomic weapons. Each warhead was a complex system of shaped charges, electromagnetic lenses, and tactical programming. When they detonated, they didn't just explode. They focused their blast into narrow cones of pure devastation, creating what human engineers called Kasaba howitzers. X-ray lasers and streams of nuclear plasma crossed the distance between ships at light speed. The Krell ships had shields designed to deflect energy weapons. But these weapons were kinetic and nuclear, technologies the Krell had abandoned thousands of years ago as primitive and inefficient. Their shields might as well have been made of paper. In the first minute, 12 Krell ships were destroyed. In the second minute, 15 more were crippled or vented to space. By the fourth minute, 35 of the 50 ships in Squadron 7 were gone, and the survivors were trying desperately to retreat. On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with professional detachment. She was 42 years old, a veteran of the Belt Wars and the Martian Rebellion. She had spent her entire adult life learning how to kill efficiently. Earth's bloody history had prepared her well. "Cease fire," she ordered. "Let the survivors run back to their fleet. I want them to report what happened here." "Aye, Captain," replied Lieutenant Morrison from the tactical station. "All weapons safed." Jesus, that was almost too easy. "Don't underestimate them," Chen warned. "They've conquered half the galaxy for a reason. We just caught them by surprise. They've been fighting species that abandoned kinetic weapons and nuclear technology centuries ago. They forgot how dangerous simple physics can be." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched through long-range sensors, their confidence in their own military doctrines suddenly shaken. For 3,000 years, galactic warfare had evolved toward energy weapons, plasma cannons, and defensive shields. Kinetic weapons were considered obsolete, too slow and too limited in an age of faster-than-light travel. But the humans had proven something the Council had forgotten. It doesn't matter how fast your shields recharge if a tungsten rod moving at a fraction of light speed punches through them before they can react. Ambassador Tyro stared at the tactical display in disbelief. They destroyed 35 ships in 4 minutes. 35. Using weapons we abandoned before we achieved spaceflight. "Not abandoned," corrected Counselor Vex, her mechanical mind rapidly analyzing the battle data. "We evolved past them. We assumed energy weapons were superior, but the humans never stopped developing kinetic systems. They weaponized physics itself." On the Krell command ship, the Hive Admiral received the reports from the survivors of Squadron 7. The shared consciousness processed the information instantly. This was not an insignificant threat. This was something new, something dangerous, something that needed to be crushed immediately before it could threaten the Dominion's expansion. Pride and fury filled the hive mind. No single ship had ever stood against them and survived. This insult could not be tolerated. The invasion of Valesia could wait an hour. First, they would destroy this arrogant newcomer and add its wreckage to the graveyard of those who had opposed them. "All ships," the Hive Admiral commanded, "abandon the blockade. Converge on the human vessel. I want 500 ships surrounding it within 10 minutes. Use overwhelming numbers. Crush them with sheer mass. Show them that defiance means death." The Krell Armada turned as one, a swarm of biological warships moving with horrible purpose. They formed a sphere around the projected position of the Indomitable, closing in from all sides. There would be no escape, no clever maneuvers, no possibility of survival. Just extinction. On Valesia, Commander Celis watched from the crippled Dawn's Prayer as the Krell fleet surrounded the human ship. She wanted to feel hope, but hope seemed foolish. One ship against 500. The humans had won one battle, but this was impossible. She tried to warn them. Her communications were barely functional, but she managed to send a tight beam transmission to the Indomitable. "Human vessel, retreat while you can. They will destroy you. You cannot fight them all. Please run. You tried to help us. We are grateful, but this is suicide." Captain Chen received the message and smiled grimly. She understood the Valesians' concern. By any reasonable military doctrine, this was suicide. One ship could not fight 500. It was mathematical impossibility. But Earth had never been reasonable. Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war, fighting themselves with increasingly sophisticated brutality. They had learned how to win when outnumbered, how to turn disadvantages into advantages, how to make the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. They had learned that warfare was not about fair fights or honorable combat. It was about winning, whatever the cost. Send a message to all Galactic Council observers, Chen ordered. Tell them to watch carefully. They're about to learn what humans mean by total war. On the tactical display, the Krell sphere was nearly complete. 500 ships surrounded them, weapons charged, ready to fire simultaneously and annihilate the Indomitable in a storm of bioplasma and living weapons. Captain Chen sat in her command chair, calm and focused. She had fought worse odds during the Belt Wars, when her cruiser had been ambushed by a full pirate fleet near Jupiter. She had survived because she understood a simple truth. Numbers only mattered if you fought the enemy's battle. The key was to make them fight yours. All hands, battle stations, she announced over the ship-wide intercom. This is going to get rough. Tactical, prepare firing solution Omega-7. Engineering, I need emergency power to kinetic systems. Helm, be ready for rapid maneuvering on my mark. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. Let's show these bugs what Earth's children learned from centuries of warfare. All weapons free. Engage at will. The Indomitable, alone against 500, opened fire, and the galaxy learned to fear humanity. Space erupted into chaos. The Indomitable did not fight like any warship the Krell had encountered before. It did not hold position and trade fire. It did not try to break through the encirclement. Instead, it dove directly toward the densest concentration of enemy ships, accelerating to speeds that should have been suicide. She's insane, breathed Ambassador Tyros as he watched from the council chambers. She's flying into the middle of them. But Captain Chen was not insane. She was calculating. The Krell had surrounded her ship in a perfect sphere, every vessel positioned to create overlapping fields of fire with no gaps. It was textbook military doctrine, designed to ensure the target could not escape and would be hit from all sides simultaneously. It was also a fatal mistake. The Indomitable's first action was to launch a spread of nuclear-pumped mines behind it. These were not traditional mines that waited for enemy ships to approach. Instead, they detonated immediately, creating massive clouds of superheated plasma and electromagnetic interference. The expanding spheres of destruction crashed into the following Krell ships, overwhelming their sensors and shields. While the Krell behind her were blinded, Chen executed a maneuver that human pilots called threading the needle. She aimed the Indomitable directly between two enemy ships, close enough that their own weapons could not target her without hitting each other. The Krell, acting through their hive mind, made a unanimous decision: hold fire to avoid friendly casualties. They would reposition and then shoot. That 3-second decision cost them dearly. As the Indomitable passed between the two Krell ships, her point defense systems opened fire at point-blank range. Railguns tore through hull plating. Armor-piercing missiles detonated inside enemy vessels. The two flanking ships were gutted in seconds, their biological systems failing as atmosphere vented and crew died. Then Chen did something that made every military observer in the galaxy pause in disbelief. She used Valesia's gravity well. Helm, slingshot maneuver, execute now, she ordered. The Indomitable dove toward the planet, using its gravity to accelerate beyond what her engines alone could achieve. The Krell pursued, 500 ships chasing one, all of them increasing speed to catch their prey. They were so focused on the kill that they failed to notice they were all following the same trajectory, bunching up as they curved around the planet. Captain Chen waited until the perfect moment. Fire solution Omega-7. All guns. Now. The Indomitable had been built on the philosophy that you could never have too many guns. Her design included 42 railgun batteries, 80 missile tubes, and 36 point defense clusters. They all fired simultaneously, not at the pursuing ships, but at the space debris field created from the earlier battle. Hundreds of tungsten rounds struck the wreckage of destroyed Krell vessels, dead Valesian ships, and random space debris. The kinetic impacts sent shrapnel flying in all directions, each piece accelerated to lethal velocities. The pursuing Krell fleet flew directly into this expanding cloud of destruction. It was like flying through a sandstorm made of knives. Small impacts became penetrating hits. Penetrating hits became cascading failures. Ships crashed into each other trying to evade. The perfect coordination of the hive mind became a liability as panic spread through the shared consciousness. The Krell lost 60 ships in that single maneuver. Not destroyed outright, but damaged, crippled, leaking atmosphere and crew. They were combat ineffective, drifting hazards that made the battlefield even more dangerous for their allies. Humans, Counselor Vex said quietly, her mechanical voice carrying a note of something that might have been admiration, have turned debris into a weapon. They are using the Krell's own dead against them. The battle continued for 2 more hours. It was brutal, desperate, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Indomitable fought with a ferocity that seemed impossible for a single ship. Captain Chen demonstrated tactics that no military academy in the Council taught, because no one had fought wars the way humanity had. She used the planet's atmosphere to hide in sensor shadows. She fired missiles on ballistic trajectories that took 30 minutes to reach their targets, forcing the Krell to maintain defensive awareness across huge volumes of space. She even launched empty cargo containers on random vectors, forcing the enemy to waste ammunition on decoys. But the most shocking moment came when the Krell made their final, desperate play. The Hive Admiral, watching the casualties mount to obscene numbers, made a decision born of frustration and fury. The Krell would use their greatest advantage, close combat. They would board the human ship and tear it apart from within. 300 Krell bioships accelerated to ramming speed, their hulls reinforced for impact. They would crash into the Indomitable, breach her hull, and send thousands of Krell warriors into her corridors. In close combat, the Krell were unmatched. Their regenerative abilities, their physical strength, their fearless hive mind coordination made them perfect killing machines in tight spaces. It should have worked. Captain Chen watched the approaching boarders with grim satisfaction. They're coming in hard, good. Marines, prepare to repel boarders. Show them what power armor can do. The first Krell bioship crashed into the Indomitable's port side, its organic hull splitting open to disgorge 100 warriors. They poured through the breach like a flood of chitinous nightmares, mandibles clicking with anticipation, ready to tear through the soft-bodied aliens who dared challenge the Dominion. They made it approximately 15 feet before encountering something they had never seen before. Human Marines in Mark 7 power armor. The armor stood 9 feet tall and weighed half a ton. It was powered by compact fusion reactors and equipped with integrated weapon systems. Each Marine was essentially a walking tank, capable of lifting a car, surviving in vacuum, and delivering firepower that could destroy light vehicles. The Krell charged with their usual fearless aggression. The Marines opened fire with rotary cannons that fired explosive rounds at 4,000 rounds per minute. The corridor became a meat grinder. Krell bodies were literally torn apart by the sustained fire, their regenerative abilities overwhelmed by sheer destructive power. When the Krell tried to close to melee range, they discovered that human power armor was not just for show. The Marines met them hand to hand, using servo-enhanced strength to literally rip Krell warriors apart. One Marine grabbed a Krell by 2 of its legs and used it as a club to beat 3 others to death before discarding the broken corpse. The boarding action lasted 7 minutes. In that time, over 600 Krell warriors entered the Indomitable. 53 made it deeper than the first 3 corridors. None survived. The human casualty report showed 4 Marines with minor injuries and 1 with a damaged armor servo. The Hive Admiral, experiencing the shared death of hundreds of warriors simultaneously, finally understood true fear. These humans did not just understand space warfare, they understood ground combat at a level that suggested centuries of practice. The Krell had evolved as hunters, but the humans had evolved as something more terrible. They were survivors who had learned to hunt the hunters. Retreat, the Hive Admiral commanded through the hive mind. All ships, full retreat. Now. For the first time in 300 years of conquest, the Krell Dominion fled from battle. Of the 500 ships that had surrounded the Indomitable, fewer than 200 were combat effective enough to execute the retreat order. The rest drifted as wreckage or limped away on damaged engines. On Valesia, Commander Celis watched in stunned silence as the Krell fleet broke and ran. Around her homeworld, the few surviving Valesian defense ships were receiving an urgent transmission from the human captain. Valesian forces, this is Captain Chen. We've driven them off, but they'll regroup eventually. I'm transmitting tactical data and defensive patterns. Use this time to evacuate your wounded and prepare better defenses. And someone please tell your people that Earth sends its regards. In the Galactic Council chambers, absolute silence reigned. 30 species watched the aftermath of the battle, trying to process what they had witnessed. One ship, one human ship against 500 Krell vessels. And the humans had won, not just survived. One Ambassador Tyros was the first to speak. We need to establish contact with Earth immediately. We need to know who these people are, where they came from, and he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. We need to make very certain they are our friends and not our enemies. Because in the span of a single battle, the galaxy had learned a terrifying truth. There was a species out there that made the Krell Dominion look like amateurs. A species that had weaponized physics itself, that fought with creativity and brutality in equal measure, that could turn any environment into a killing field. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had announced their presence with the sound of railguns. News of the Krell defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every species with FTL communication capabilities knew that the impossible had happened. The Krell Dominion, the nightmare that had consumed 47 civilizations, had been beaten back by a single ship from an unknown species called humans. The Galactic Council's emergency session was the most crowded in recorded history. Representatives from species that had not attended council meetings in decades suddenly appeared, all wanting to know the same thing. Who were these humans, and what did they want? Captain Sarah Chen stood before the assembled council 3 days after the battle. She had cleaned up and wore her formal naval uniform, but there was still a tiredness in her eyes that spoke of combat and hard decisions. The Indomitable floated in orbit above the council station, a reminder to everyone present of what humanity could do. Captain Chen, began first speaker Melora, a dignified alien with silver skin and 3 eyes. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you for your intervention at Valesia. However, we have many questions. How did you find us? Why did you help? And most importantly, what does Earth want? Chen took a breath and began her testimony. Earth achieved practical FTL travel 8 months ago. We didn't announce ourselves because we wanted to understand the galactic situation first. For 60 years, we had been receiving and decoding broadcasts from nearby systems. We learned your languages. We studied your cultures. We listened to your history. She paused, her expression hardening. And we heard the screams. We intercepted distress calls from species being destroyed by the Krell. We watched recordings of the atrocities they committed. We read the Council's official responses, which usually amounted to thoughts, prayers, and precisely nothing useful. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Tyros spoke up, his voice defensive. You do not understand the complexities of galactic politics. Military intervention requires consensus, resources, coordination across dozens of species. Excuses, Chen interrupted flatly. What you're describing is bureaucracy choosing comfort over action. The Krell have been conducting genocide for 3 centuries. And you've done nothing effective to stop them, because stopping them would be difficult and expensive and might fail. First Speaker Melora's expression remained neutral. You judge us harshly, Captain. But tell me, if Earth is so principled, why did you send only 1 ship? Why not a fleet if you care so much about stopping genocide? Chen smiled, though there was no humor in it. We sent the Indomitable as a test. We needed to understand how the Krell fought, what their capabilities were, whether our weapons and tactics would be effective. We intercepted Valesia's distress call and decided to intervene. Consider it a field exercise, a test? Counselor Vex leaned forward, her mechanical body whirring softly. You risked your ship and crew as a test? We're the military, Chen replied simply. Risk is what we do. And yes, it was a test, one we passed. Now we know we can fight the Krell effectively. Now we know your defensive doctrines are outdated. Now we know the galaxy needs help whether it wants to admit it or not. The council chamber erupted in multiple languages as representatives argued among themselves. Some were offended by Chen's bluntness. Others were hopeful. A few were clearly terrified. First Speaker Melora called for order. Captain Chen, your actions saved the Valesian people, and for that we are grateful. But you must understand our concern. Your species appears from nowhere with military technology we do not fully understand, defeats an enemy that has terrified us for centuries, and now stands before us making judgments about our policies. How do we know you are not simply a different kind of threat? It was a fair question, and Chen had expected it. You have to make a choice based on actions, not words. We could have demanded tribute from Malaysia for saving them. We didn't. We could have seized territory or resources. We haven't. We could have simply left after the battle. We stayed to help with reconstruction and share defensive tactics. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Indomitable's specifications. The council members leaned forward, studying the data with intense interest. Then Chen zoomed out, revealing a classification system. The Indomitable was listed as an escort carrier, one of the smallest capital ships in the Earth fleet. The silence in the chamber was absolute. "That's right," Chen said quietly. "The Indomitable is what we consider a medium-sized support vessel. It's not even in our top 20 largest warships. If you're wondering whether Earth could conquer the galaxy, the answer is probably yes. But we're not interested in conquest. We've spent the last 10,000 years conquering each other, and we're tired of it. We finally united as a species about 200 years ago, and we're still learning how to work together." She closed the display and faced the council directly. "Earth wants to propose an alliance. Not one based on fear or dominance, but on mutual defense. We'll share our military technology and tactical doctrine. In return, we want access to your scientific knowledge, your medicine, your culture. We want to trade, learn, and grow together. But there's one condition that's non-negotiable." "And what is that?" asked First Speaker Melora. "No more appeasement of aggressors," Chen stated firmly. "No more sitting in comfortable chambers debating while civilizations burn. No more counting the cost of action while ignoring the cost of inaction. The Council needs to form a true defense coalition, with real military coordination and the will to use it. If you want our help against the Krell or any other threat, you need to be willing to fight alongside us." Ambassador Tyros stood, his scales shimmering with emotion. "Many of us would welcome such an alliance, Captain. But you must understand, not all Council species are warriors. Some of us are philosophers, scientists, artists. We are not built for war." "Neither were the Valasians," Chen countered, "but they fought anyway when they had no choice. I'm not asking you to become warriors. I'm asking you to support those who fight on your behalf, and to contribute to the defense of civilization in whatever way you can. The Krell understand only strength. Right now you show them weakness divided into 30 different flavors." The debate continued for hours. Some species pledged immediate support for the alliance. Others wanted to deliberate with their home governments. A few, isolated and far from Krell space, questioned whether any action was needed at all. As the Council argued, something was happening in the depths of Krell space that would make their decision much easier. The Hive Admiral had returned to the Krell birthing worlds in disgrace. The shared consciousness of the Dominion vibrated with fury at the defeat. For 300 years they had been unstoppable. Now a single ship from a species they had never heard of had shattered that invincibility. The Krell Empress herself, ancient and massive in her bio-throne, demanded answers. Through the hive mind, she studied every detail of the battle. She analyzed human tactics, weapons, and capabilities, and she reached a conclusion that sent ripples of determination through billions of Krell warriors across dozens of systems. This human threat must be crushed immediately. Not just defeated, crushed, destroyed so completely that no trace remained. The Dominion would gather its full military might, thousands of ships from core territories that had not seen battle in decades. They would find Earth and burn it to ash. They would make an example that would terrify the galaxy into submission for another 300 years. The Krell began their mobilization. It would take months to gather their forces, but when they struck, it would be with overwhelming power. No single ship, no matter how advanced, could stand against their true might. They had learned from their mistake. They would never underestimate these humans again. Back at the Council station, Captain Chen received an encrypted transmission from Earth Fleet Command. She read it quickly, then allowed herself a small smile. She interrupted the ongoing debate politely but firmly. "First Speaker, Council members, I've just received notification from Earth. I thought you should know that Earth has not been idle while waiting for your deliberations. 3 months ago, we dispatched the 3rd Fleet to this sector as a follow-up to the Indomitable's mission." She pulled up a new holographic display. It showed 20 battleships, each twice the size of the Indomitable, along with 40 cruisers, 60 destroyers, and a full complement of support vessels. "Over 150 warships in total. They'll arrive in approximately 4 weeks," Chen continued. "Their mission is to permanently resolve the Krell threat. We're not asking for your permission. We're offering you the chance to participate, to show the galaxy that civilization can defend itself when it chooses to act together. The council chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Before, the debate had been whether to ally with humans. Now it was about how quickly they could prepare their own forces to join them, because the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't just going to defend against the Krell. They were going to war, and when Earth sent its fleet to war, the galaxy would learn the difference between fighting for survival and fighting to win. 3 months later, the combined fleet assembled at the edge of Krell space. 20 human battleships floated in formation alongside 300 vessels from 14 council species. It was the largest military coalition the galaxy had seen in over 1,000 years. And it existed because humanity had proven that the Krell could be beaten. Admiral Marcus Stone commanded the human Third Fleet from the battleship USNS Thunderchild. He was 60 years old, gray-haired, and carried the weight of 2 colonial wars and a dozen smaller conflicts on his shoulders. He had volunteered for this mission the moment he heard about the Krell. Stone had spent his career fighting human threats. The chance to fight for something larger than Earth politics had appealed to him. Status report. Stone requested from his command chair. All human vessels ready and in position, reported his tactical officer. Council forces are still organizing into their assigned formations. The Saruans are having trouble with their navigation systems again. Stone allowed himself a small smile. Send them our nav data and have Lieutenant Park walk them through the synchronization. We need everyone on the same page before we jump. The past 3 months had been intensive. Human military advisors had spread across the Council fleet, teaching combined arms doctrine, coordinated fire patterns, and modern tactical theory. It had been challenging. Many species had not fought a major war in centuries. Their ships were designed for exploration or light patrol duty, not sustained combat. But they were learning, and more importantly, they were trying. Counselor Vex, now serving as the Council's military liaison, appeared on the command screen. Admiral Stone, the Council forces report ready, though I must express concern about our chances. Krell intelligence indicates they have assembled over 3,000 ships in their core systems. We are still outnumbered 10 to 1. Noted, Stone replied calmly. But numbers aren't everything. The Krell are about to learn what humans call combined arms warfare. Your energy weapons will complement our kinetic systems perfectly. They're expecting us to fight the way they've always been fought. We're going to do something different. The fleet jumped to FTL, emerging in Krell space 3 hours later. The sight that greeted them was staggering. The Krell had gathered their full might around their primary birthing worlds. Bioships stretched across the void in impossible numbers, organized in defensive layers that would take hours to penetrate. The Krell Hive Empress watched the approaching fleet through thousands of eyes. She had prepared for this moment carefully. The humans would find no easy victories here. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior of the Dominion stood ready to defend their existence. This would be the battle that ended humanity's brief moment of galactic relevance. Admiral Stone studied the defensive formation and nodded in approval. They've learned from the indomitable fight. Good defensive depth, no clustering, clear firing lanes. They've prepared well. Sir, that's 3,000 ships, his tactical officer said nervously. Even with Council support, this is going to be brutal. War is always brutal, Lieutenant. But we're not here to win pretty. We're here to win permanently. Stone opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. Today we fight not just for Earth or for the Council, but for every species the Krell have destroyed. For 47 civilizations that no longer exist. For the billions of voices that were silenced. We carry their memory into battle. Make them proud. All vessels, execute Alpha 7 on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The combined fleet divided into 3 groups, each taking a different approach vector to the Krell defensive sphere. The Krell prepared to meet each thrust with overwhelming force, confident in their numerical superiority. Then the humans revealed the first surprise. The Council ships equipped with plasma cannons and particle beams opened fire at maximum range, their energy weapons reaching out across vast distances. The Krell shields activated, deflecting the incoming fire as expected. This was familiar warfare. This they understood. While the Krell focused on the energy attacks, the human battleships launched missile spreads that seemed suicidally wasteful. Hundreds of missiles, each on a ballistic trajectory, traveling at sublight speeds that would take minutes to reach their targets. The Krell tracking systems flagged them as low-priority threats. Missiles that slow could be intercepted easily. What the Krell didn't understand was that these weren't attack missiles. They were delivery systems for something far more dangerous: coordinated nuclear minefields. The missiles spread out across the battlefield and detonated simultaneously, creating overlapping zones of radiation, electromagnetic interference, and superheated plasma. The Krell shields, designed for direct fire, suddenly found themselves trying to protect against environmental hazards from all directions. Council forces, concentrate fire on grid sectors 7 through 12, Stone ordered. Hit them while their shields are cycling. The combined fleet poured fire into the weakened sections. Krell ships, suddenly vulnerable, began taking catastrophic damage. But they were not defenseless. 3,000 ships meant 3,000 weapons platforms, and the Krell began returning fire with devastating effect. The battle became a brutal slugging match. Human railguns punched through Krell hulls while bioplasma burned through Allied shields. Council energy weapons carved through enemy formations while acid missiles corroded human armor plating. Ships on both sides died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Admiral Stone watched the casualty reports climb and forced himself to remain calm. This was the reality of large-scale warfare. Good people died, ships were lost. But giving in to grief or doubt would kill even more. He had to focus on winning, because winning was the only way to save the most lives in the long run. Deploy the Kasaba howitzer ships, he ordered. Target the Krell command cluster. 6 human cruisers broke formation and accelerated directly toward the heaviest concentration of Krell vessels. They were technically suicide ships, crewed by volunteers who knew they probably weren't coming back. Their hulls had been stripped down and filled with enhanced nuclear weapons designed for one purpose: to create focused beams of nuclear plasma that could cut through multiple ships in a single detonation. The Krell recognized the threat and concentrated fire on the approaching cruisers. 3 were destroyed before reaching their targets. The remaining 3 made it into optimal position before detonating their payloads simultaneously. The resulting nuclear lances carved through 17 Krell capital ships, including 3 command vessels. The Krell hive mind shuddered as thousands of shared consciousnesses went dark at once. For a brief moment, coordination faltered. Ships hesitated. Formations wavered. It was only 3 seconds of confusion, but 3 seconds was an eternity in modern combat. The combined fleet exploited the gap ruthlessly. Concentrated fire hammered into the disorganized Krell forces, destroying another 40 ships before they could recover. When the hive mind re-established control, the Krell had lost 20% of their forces and the battle had only been raging for 2 hours. The Hive Empress, feeling the deaths of her children through the shared consciousness, made a decision. She activated her personal bioship, a massive vessel the size of a small moon, and took direct command of the battle. Her presence stabilized the hive mind and reinvigorated the Krell warriors. They would not break. They would not retreat. They would fight to the last ship if necessary. For 6 more hours the battle raged. Space became a graveyard of wrecked ships and floating debris. Human casualties climbed into the thousands. Council vessels were lost by the dozens, but the Krell were losing faster. Their regenerative abilities, so effective in previous wars, were overwhelmed by the sheer destructive power being thrown at them. Then the Krell played their final card. They deployed a biological weapon, a virus engineered to target non-Krell life forms and spread rapidly through ship ventilation systems. It was a desperation move, but effective. Within minutes, several Council ships reported crew infections. Panic began spreading through the Allied fleet. Admiral Stone received the bioweapon reports and felt a cold fury settle over him. Using biological weapons was a line even Earth's worst wars had rarely crossed. The Krell had just made this personal. Deploy countermeasure packages, he ordered. Send the medical data to all Allied ships immediately. His medical officer looked confused. Sir, we need time to analyze the virus and develop a cure. That could take days. We don't need to develop a cure, Stone replied grimly. We already have one. You think Earth hasn't spent centuries preparing for biowarfare? We've cataloged and created countermeasures for thousands of potential biological agents, nanomedical treatments, broad-spectrum antivirals, adaptive immune boosters. We learned this lesson the hard way in the biowars of 2087. Send everything we have to the infected ships. Within 30 minutes, The Krell bioweapon had been neutralized. The Allied crews recovered, the panic subsided, and the Krell's final advantage evaporated. They had nothing left but numbers, and those numbers were shrinking rapidly. The Hive Empress, watching her forces crumble, finally understood what Captain Chen had tried to tell the galaxy. Humans were not simply a warrior species. They were survivors who had weaponized their survival.